This episode of Two Guys on Mobile is brought to you by Pontiflex App Leads. Go to www.appleads.com. And by Macadamian, helping companies transform ideas into compelling, market-ready products customers love. You can find them at macadamian.com. It's time for Two Guys on Mobile. This is episode number 23, and we're actually recording this live on July 25th. That's a Monday, because we were too busy on the weekend. We were too busy last week. Got pushed and pushed and pushed, so we finally decided we got to do it. So as always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob Woodbridge from Untether.tv, and found it at Rob Woodbridge on the Twitter. And with me for every single episode, Mr. Jeff Bacon. Jeffrey.
Hey.
He's found at the Suave Hog on Twitter and bacononthego.com. Jeff, we had to get this done. It's been, I think it's gone through withdrawal here because it's been over a week since our last episode, right? I feel like confession.
Yes, it's the summer solstice happening to us here or something.
Well, we were talking about this before. I was lamenting the fact that, I think summer is uninspiring. I don't know why people take so much time off in the summer. Go and enjoy it, because especially in Canada, we only have maybe 3 or 4 days of good weather. And enjoy it over the summer, but when things stop, it's pretty amazing. Innovation stops. I know that entrepreneurs are out there with their heads down, building product, but man, the news is all the same and not interesting. How's that for a summary?
I've got more out-of-office replies in the last 2 weeks than I do in the first 6 months of the year.
Well, those out-of-office replies, like, I'll be back in September. Man, it's middle of July. Who could? What? The world is going to change by the time you... Anyway, I've gotten those back. I'm out of vacation. I'm out of town on vacation until after Labor Day. So catch you on September 5th with no access to email. I'm like, well, you're out of business then. Man. Anyway, so I won't name names, but I'm trying to reach you if you're listening to this and you know who you are. Man. So we managed to scrounge up a couple of stories. This week is very topical. These are stories that came out within the last couple of days that we're going to dive a little bit deeper into. We're going to talk about Pandora. We're going to talk about Apple and the fact that they've actually gone and enforced their book or their in-app purchasing process. And we're going to touch on a couple of other stories if we have time. But I think the first story that we are going to attack here is Pandora. Because there's a lot of hype around these so-called internet or mobile radio stations. And I'm going to reserve my judgment until after I ask you and we get into this conversation, because I have a very clear opinion about these services. And it kind of starts with a W, then it moves into a T, and then it moves into an F with a question mark. That's where I'm going to leave it. But Bacon, Pandora came out and said, listen, or reports are that Pandora came out and said, like, they own a considerable amount of, they own a good percentage of the listening market in the United States, and they are not making enough money when it comes to, they can't convert that listenership into revenue through advertising. That's the big challenge, obviously, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They said that they basically can't fill all their advertising slots, so they don't have 100% fill on their mobile advertising slots, and they can't make a profit on the current fill they've got at the current price that they can charge for mobile advertising. Pandora is experiencing something that many mobile companies have experienced when they see this gold rush of, oh look, mobile advertising, you can generate $4 a user on it, and it's great. And then you run your app and you see Apple's "this is a test" advertisement pop up all over in applications, because you just can't sell enough ad space to fill all the possible areas on the screen that you need to show. So when Pandora is having millions of ad slots being shown all the time, they're not getting the fill rate on it. And the cost to stream the music that they're paying the music industry for it is much more than they're able to, is significantly more than they're able to recoup in just investment dollars. So I think it's an interesting, like, Pandora says they're ahead of the times. Pandora says, well, we generate way more usage on mobile than people are currently willing to pay for, because advertisers don't understand the value of mobile, or the value of mobile hasn't translated into high click-through dollars and such, which it's an interesting argument to make. kind of the reverse argument that was made on the web, when initially it was really high dollars being spent, and then it kept dropping and dropping and dropping as people recognized the value of a click-through was a lot less than the many dollars that were originally spent just to get visitors to the site. So I think it's been an interesting challenge for Pandora to drive revenue higher, because I don't think the advertising fees per ad placement are going to go up in the next few years. They're more likely going to go down, because as Pandora is proving, there's no demand. It's a supply and demand. They have extra supply, so how could they possibly charge more?
You know, you're not going to get an argument from me. I mean, you know my views. We were talking about this before we went live. Is that I look at Pandora, I look at Spotify, I look at all these companies as Radio 2.0. I mean, I already have a music discovery system that's built into my car that I'm not paying for, that is wholly subsidized by advertising. And oh, by the way, they're not doing that well either, right? And if you take that model and then you just throw it on a mobile phone, I mean, just give me an FM radio on my mobile phone. I know that I'm being facetious here, but only partially, because this is a model that you know, radio isn't going to die. But do I really need it on my mobile phone? Do I need the cost of it? Because a consumption standpoint, it's very costly when it comes to bandwidth consumption. And all of the carriers in the U.S. are abandoning unlimited packages. In the States, in Canada, we never had one, but they're being judicious with the bandwidth that they're giving out. Good or bad, right or wrong, all I know is that Pandora and Spotify are Radio 2.0, and there's nothing innovative about this. The only thing that's different is that I can get it on my mobile device. You can argue, or you can. If anybody disagrees with that, think about the fundamentals. They talk about music as these softwares as being music discovery tools, and that's what radio was pitched as when it was invented, and I listen to radio stations from around the world. I listen to every single Major League Baseball game through MLB.tv's app on my iPhone, which is great. Very, very focused. But if I wanted to listen to a Vancouver radio station or a Sacramento radio station, I just go to that. I go to that radio station and I listen to it. So for me, not a big user of the services. I'm up in Canada, which is a disadvantage. But even when Pandora was available in Canada on the web, it was like, I have a radio.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that it's Radio 2.0, and maybe it's the best example of Radio 2.0. And what you see in individual stations and things like MLB at Bat is Radio 3.0, which is dedicated content production around specific items, whether it's baseball, where they're aggregating a bunch of stations, or whether it's your local station who has an app where you can stream the radio on, whether it's Rogers Communications, who has an app that you can stream most of the Rogers stations on, which is kind of a crappy app, but at least it's there. So I mean, that may be Radio 3.0, but Radio 4.0 is going to be what we're all seeing now with all these hundreds of millions of apps out there, that eventually you get icon overload, and you can have 11 pages of apps like I do on my iPhone and multiple folders and go and try and find stuff, and you end up with, you filter down and you use 20 of them, or whatever the number is. You have a bunch of other ones there, and you rarely use them. And would I prefer to have one icon that was my radio icon, and in there I could just choose from my content, versus having to scan through 50 different icons for it? Yeah, absolutely. So I think Spotify is just, and Sirius and XM are also in this Radio 2.0 category, which is a globalization of music content distribution. So instead of having a local station, now you have a global station that's available in different ways. Pandora's advantage is that you don't have to have specific hardware for it, because it runs on basically an internet connection versus Sirius and XM. But it's that second level of moving away from a local-based system into a global-based system. But I think that you're already starting to see that Radio 3.0, as you said, with like MLB at Bat, and with like Rogers having multiple stations that people are used to in one. And Pandora's going to have to find a way to evolve themselves, and Sirius and XM are going to have the same issue. To evolve themselves
They've even got a worse
to Radio 4.0, which is when I want all of my music in one space, one location. I don't mind paying for it. I've paid for music for a long time. I pay Rogers, and they give me Galaxy radio stations on channels like 700 through 800 on my cable box, which I actually use quite regularly when I have groups of friends over it, because it's commercial-free radio that I'm paying for. So I don't think that they have a problem with this specific idea of that radio is something people are going to want to listen to and not have to choose their own music. It's like what you do with news. It's curated content. So radio stations are curating music content for customers, and they can figure out what they like based on that, just like curated news sources on the web have become popular because there's been so much choice for it.
Yeah, and I even look at Spotify. A report just came out that in the first 2 weeks they signed out 70,000 U.S. residents since the launch in the U.S. and I think that this is great. I think from a music discovery, and Turntable.fm was the rage for a while until it got shut down in Canada because of copyright issues. And there's still, I don't know what's going on with that, but I just think that a company like Pandora, you're always going to have a challenge because radio stations are inherently local. And this is where you're starting to see a lot of companies went away from this localized, advertising, and it has to be actionable. So right now, I mean, radio stations that are succeeding are hyper local. Like there's a pothole on First and Bank, right? That's what you're hearing on the radio. And in order to be able to create that advertising connection, you have to be able to have it resonate, right? Is that what kind of advertiser is Pandora attracting when it's a national audience? Even if they can localize it, you have so many slots to fill, and you have to be able to localize it. And if you don't, and you just throw filler up there, it doesn't make sense. They've got to come up with a different way to generate revenue, and I think that. Advertising on radio has stabilized or normalized and declined and popped up and declined and everybody's talked about the death of radio, but you know what? I'll see the death of Pandora before I see the death of radio, and I'll see the death of Spotify before the death of radio, and it's just because there's nothing unique here. There just isn't. Even I think that when you get down to it, it's even the licensing of music. I think from an independent artist, there's an opportunity here to expand the reach. But Leo Laporte did this. There's some infographic that says how many plays a song needs to get in order to be able to generate some revenue, enough revenue, sustainable, above the the poverty line. And in Spotify and Pandora, it's like I don't even want to quote it, but I believe it's in the hundreds of thousands of plays a month in order for them to be able to generate enough money to live a subsistence level above the poverty line. And whereas radio, it's hundreds of plays, right? And the scale of that just says to me that this just can't work. Like there's something missing. Fundamentally, there's something missing. Maybe this is step one, but man.
Well, the difference is that, I mean,
you're gonna find
how do you define a radio station?
Well,
right?
Yeah.
You have to define what it is as a radio station is. A radio station is a collection of songs sourced from external people, artists, distributors, publishers. They're curated. They're interspersed with local-based advertising, which is targeted advertising, so it generates a higher demand and therefore a higher revenue for those particular advertisements that are in there. And they're interspersed with shows that may be syndicated shows nationally or globally or whatever that are pre-canned and have some global advertising and local advertising slots in it. But if you look at something like Pandora or Spotify in the context of ABC or NBC or CBS, okay, which are national in the United States, national television stations, but they don't sell all their own advertising. They have local affiliates which convert their shows into a local stream interspersed with local news, local advertisements, along with national advertisements. So you basically segment out these 30-second blocks where the local station knows where they're going to be, and they can sell those 30-second blocks to local advertisers. And you also have the 30-second blocks that ABC can sell to national advertisers. So if Pandora and Spotify look at their content in the same vein and say, okay, if you're on a mobile device and you're seeing the Pandora saying something like 40% of their users or 42% are on mobile devices, then you can provide local content to individual users. So basically, you can dynamically create an individual local radio station for a person based on a type of content, whether it's rock or
sure. Well, I mean, Springsteen has Backstreet Radio on Sirius or XM, but it's not worth the $9.99 a month to do that for me, even though I could listen to it all day.
But why do you listen to a Vancouver radio station, or why do you listen to a Ottawa radio station? Like, how do you choose the station?
News. So I'm not a perfect example here. Is that, I'll listen to an Ottawa radio station when I want some local news. I'll listen to a national radio station when I want some local news. But I'm a podcast guy, so I'll listen to the CBC podcast hourly news at the end of the day, and I'll get caught up on it. Same thing. So the only time I listen to out of town radio stations is when I wanted to listen to the Vancouver Canucks. During the Stanley Cup, I would find that radio station and listen to it, a localized station. So music for me, it's important, but it's not the driving force for me. And so, but I want to just finish this. Is that this is a maybe I'll include a link to this if I remember in the notes. But it's for a solo artist to earn $1,160, which is the U.S. Monthly minimum wage per month, $1,160. It just goes through all of the different factors, right? It says that from a self-pressed CD, they must sell 143 self-pressed CDs, and then it starts to get into iTunes number of, for example, an album download from iTunes. They have to do 1,229 of those. Then it kind of goes into Amazon per track download. They have to sell 12,399 tracks. Rhapsody, which is a streaming technology that we're talking about here, 849,000 plays per month. And then it gets into Last.fm, which is Spotify, which is the worst of the bunch. The last one, they have to do 4,053,000 plays per month to generate $1,160 per month. So, this is a challenge, right? If it's advertising is only half the battle here, I think that the rest is going to be around can they actually turn this into revenue. I don't know that Pandora can, even though they're a public company. I don't get the financials on this.
But those numbers that you just quoted are directly related to the amount of revenue you can derive off of those sources.
Yep.
So right now Spotify is so low, and Pandora it would be very low as well in there, because the amount of revenue you can generate on each of those ads playing during your song is very low, and therefore those services can't afford to pay higher fees for that music.
Right.
If Pandora or Spotify could afford to pay the same rates as a regular radio station, then you'd have to generate the exact same number of plays as a local radio station.
Right.
So the key for these streaming music services is, how do I generate revenue equivalent to what a local radio station would be so I can pay that same amount to those artists?
Right.
And that's what you do. You derive a local station for that person, a personalized local station for the music type that they want, interspersed with local and national advertising, interspersed with local content and national content, just like you would do on a local radio station here. And once the ad spaces are full, once Pandora starts telling people, sorry, I can't take your money, I have no ad slots available, that's when the ad rates go up. Yep. But until you fill that bucket, you can't generate more revenue on it. Until you have 100% coverage on all your ad slots, the price is basically zero. Like, it's 1 cent. So Pandora makes more money if they take 1 cent from me per ad to fill their unfilled ad slots than they do if they leave them open. So until that they're full and they have to charge me 2 cents or 3 cents or 4 cents or start that basically a bidding war to do that ad fill, there's no way to generate that revenue, and that's really the key for them.
Well, it's going to be a long battle for these guys because they're reinventing radio, and I just don't think that radio needs reinvention.
Well, it's an evolution of radio. I don't think it's reinventing it. It looks like reinventing because it's done so different, but if they did it the same way, they just changed their systems to do it the same way as regular radio is set up. They just look at themselves as saying, instead of saying, okay, we're going to create 101.1, and it's going to be this type of music, it's going to have these hosts on it, and there. They said, what music do you want? It's a rock station? Okay, you're going to be Rock 101. Rob, you're going to be Rock 102. Mm-hmm. The station's going to have the same music on it, except for you may like and dislike songs, and therefore the music tracks being picked will be slightly different. And I'm in Ottawa, and you're in Toronto, and so you're going to get Toronto-based local ads. I'm going to get Ottawa-based local ads. When it comes to the local news hour, I'm going to pay for an Ottawa local news show, and it's going to be on mine, but you're going to get the Toronto local news show. Mm-hmm. And so instead of having to fix and create all these stations, you dynamically create the stations for each person. You get a hyper-local, individualized station in which that's where you generate the same revenue as any local station here. In fact, more, because you know more about me. So you can get an advertiser to say, no, I won't broadcast your ad to all 10,000 people listening right now, of which 100 of them may play sports. I will broadcast it to the 100 people who play sports. and I'll sell the other ad slot to somebody else who wants to advertise for a boutique lingerie shop, for someone who likes to go buy lingerie. And so when you can do that, when you can segment your ads like that, you can charge more per ad view, even though you paying for those 100 people that see sports ads might be less cost than paying for 10,000 people of which 100 only see sports ads. If you can fill your ads, if you can segment it down and break those up and fill those extra slots in aggregate, you can generate more revenue.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, I think that, if you really want to help in that kind of stuff, in localized advertising, localized, artist, basically discovery. I think that wouldn't it be cool if I was sitting in the middle of Toronto or sitting in the middle of Halifax or New York or Illinois, I was in Chicago somewhere, and I launched Pandora and it pulled up the local hot bands and it started streaming that. That's kind of localized, content discovery. I don't know if they're doing that or not. But again, it's just there's a market here, but we're not there, and that's I don't know what it's going to take, but my feeling is that what we're seeing here is quite literally Radio 2.0, and I think it's in search of something that we don't need right now. But let's see where this evolves to. I like the idea of customized everything so that it gets my taste, but ultimately then I might as well just listen to my playlist that's on my iPhone.
Except you don't own every song on iTunes. You only own the songs that you've purchased.
But then, that gets into the question about what's going on with the cloud services that are out there, right? And the recommendation engines that are going to be coming through Apple and through Google, and the cloud services that are there. And is there a play for these guys as well? And I don't know the answer to this other than, what's going on now. Pandora's been around for quite some time, and certainly they've said that 60% of all their access is in the mobile space, and mobile wasn't prevalent when they started. And what does that mean going forward? And I think that a nascent industry, but they can't find revenue right there. That's not a good sign. That's all I'm going to say.
But you know what it is example of? A perfect company that was started before mobile was as prevalent as now, and now has to either adjust or recreate their business model to focus on mobile, because that's where their business will be moving forward. And if they focus on mobile, they can take that infrastructure and what they're doing and move it to non-mobile stuff. So that once you're me, I'm me, whether I'm on my stereo at home, whether I'm in my car, no matter where I am, you can still give me my radio stations that are customized for me, but you start with me as a customer on mobile. I think that's where I hope people at Pandora are looking at that and saying, okay, it's not about what we've done, it's about how do we reinvent what we've done and take what we've been successful at in our relationships with advertisers and the music industry and reinvent that to make it work on mobile first.
Well, here's hoping that they're listening to that. Or this.
And if they need some help with that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if they would like to open it up to the Canadians, we have our own different views because we're locked out from up here. If you have any comments on that, if you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear from you at untether@gmail.com. Leave a comment. It doesn't matter. You can be as blasphemous as you want. We all have our own opinions, and we do this because we like to elicit some comments or opinion out of you guys. And whether we have to play good cop, bad cop, then we'll do it. Just to get some comments here. Second story, which is a little bit more controversial, that just came out, which is Apple. Finally, they gave everybody fair warning, but the deadline has come and passed for companies who have in-app stores to adhere to the policies of iTunes or remove their applications from the store. So immediately, I think that what ended up happening is that the Google Books application for the iPad disappeared. It's no longer available. And I just got a notification for an update for the Amazon Kindle app saying there's an update, and oh, by the way, this removes the bookstore button from the application. It's the first bullet. Maybe there's a couple of other bullets, but the first one is this removes the bookstore the bookstore button from the application. So please update it, which I haven't, because I don't want to lose that. But a lot of controversy around this when it was announced that Apple was going to do this, and now that it's actually in place, even more. I've seen a balanced argument from both sides saying, look, it's Apple. I mean, Amazon takes 30% of everything, and before Apple came along, they used to take 70% of everything, and now they're only 30. And to, the supporting side to the Apple's a big monopolistic bastard that wants to take all of our money and bankrupt the average book reader or the bookseller. I don't know, where do you sit on this, Jeff?
I've always told people that I don't have a problem with Apple saying it's our platform, we built it, we designed it, we own it, we haven't done anything monopolistic to try and make it more popular. It's everybody that's buying it with the restrictions we put on it. We haven't said, oh, we're going to leave this open forever and therefore gone back on our word. They've never committed to that in the future. Their past history has shown that they will always close the loopholes in there, and developers, either if they don't know that because they haven't looked into it, then they're not smart enough to be on the platform, and I don't have any sympathy for them. If they have looked into it, then they must have a backup plan. You have to have a backup plan to deal with when Apple changes their policy. So I fully support Apple's, permission or their right to make this change and to enforce this change. On the flip side, I think that Apple being this controlling on their platform opens up massive opportunities for other platforms to provide better and different service to customers or to companies that want to partner with them. And I don't think that Android and RIM have been as, I don't want to say accommodating, but as public with their accommodations as they should be. RIM doesn't care. If you're on BlackBerry, if you want to ship through Apple, you can charge people however you want to charge. You can have a credit card built into your app. You can charge people through Amazon. You can have Google checkout in your app that you ship on AppWorld. RIM doesn't care. But they don't put this big press release out there saying, hey, by the way, you know what we have that they don't? It's that you can charge people and get around our 30%, because the bean counters on the AppWorld side are saying, wait a minute, we would like people to use our system and we want to get 30% from it. But they have a competitive advantage that they're not taking advantage of for developers and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe you think you can only generate half the number of downloads on our platform, but you can generate 50% more sales, approximately 30% more to 70 is whatever that is, 45% higher revenue off.
You lost me at 7.
So I mean, it's one of those things where they don't promote it enough to say that it's an advantage for their platform. Therefore, it's not an advantage for their platform because people don't know about it. So I think that's the biggest thing in the next 6 months to a year, is to see if these other platforms, whether it's Microsoft or Google or RIM, either take advantage of this by promoting the fact that you can do something different, or take advantage of it by changing their policies to match what Apple is doing.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, I think that Apple did their earnings call last week, and they had $72 billion in the bank, like $72 billion sitting in the bank, available. That's a whole lot of money, right? Just sitting there. So obviously they know what they're doing, right? And when it comes to generating revenue, and I want to be very clear on that there's a difference between a company that generates revenue. I mean, Apple is not a human. Apple is not a mind. Apple is an entity, and the people that run that organization are there to actually benefit that entity. People have got to understand that. Apple is, you can't be personal. You can't think personal about an Apple, a company like Apple, or any company like RIM or Microsoft. It's there for one reason, and it's a very egotistical reason. A company is all about the company. It's not about anything else. So when it comes to this idea, when it has, that these guys want to generate revenue, when you get into the multiple billions of dollars per quarter in revenue, and you have $72 billion in the bank, and your stock is still depressed, right, is still going down, it's because you're not earning enough. And there's a concern over what you can actually generate in additional revenue above and beyond. At some point, it gets very difficult to grow your revenue incrementally by 1%, because that's an insane amount of money that has to do this. So companies like Apple or RIM or Microsoft or Nokia or IBM have to start looking outside and think, okay, how can we actually do this? How can we generate more income based on the fact that we have, a huge audience like this, 200 plus million iOS users? So that's where it gets into it. So it's incremental releases of the hardware, the software. I mean, they did 1 million downloads, I think, or 10 million downloads of the iOS Lion at $30 a pop. This is just another way to generate revenue. And it's their environment. They've never been apologetic about saying, listen, this is iOS, this is who we are, we're an independent company, we're not a monopoly, this isn't a comparison to Google, and antitrust, because Google is a monopoly when you own 70% of the world's search, versus Apple, which owns a smaller percentage, less than 20% of the hardware, is controlled by them. Less than 10% of the desktops is controlled by them. So this has always been Apple. It's like, you're in or you're out. Fuck, I don't care. Part of my language. But if you're in, we'll expose you here. If you're out, go and do it. And they've never been mainstream when it came to that. So I think that there is an opportunity for a company to take this. But on the flip side, this is probably where that RIM could learn, right? It's one thing to get people to be a part of the ecosystem. It's another thing to get people to be able to make money through your ecosystem. And that's what Apple has done exceptionally well, is that they've said, listen, trust us, we're going to make you some money. And RIM, on the other hand, if they go, they should either go free, no fees, right, for everything that they do for their app store to get an ecosystem built, and still allow, and then still market their app world, and allow their developers and people who, it would entice people to come and actually build applications for the BlackBerry platform, maybe even a book app that would alleviate this stress. They should be doing that. I think you said that episode 1, that RIM should just basically remove all fees, and that would be the best thing to do. But
remove all fees, or promote the companies that are making money on their platform. I was talking to RIM, was that last week or something, and I was to a couple different people there. I'm saying, look, there are people making money on the BlackBerry platform. There are lots of people making money on the BlackBerry platform. I talk to people every week making money on the BlackBerry platform, but I don't read news stories about them. I don't read press releases from RIM about them. I don't see them featured up in major news articles or stories or advertisements or full-page ads in the New York Times saying, here are companies making money on BlackBerry. Come and talk to them if you want to find out why it's good to work on BlackBerry.
Yep.
We both have a good friend that is making good money on BlackBerry apps right now. And he'd say, I'm glad that other companies aren't doing it, because he can just make any application and make money on it. But RIM doesn't let people know that. RIM doesn't promote the message out there, and they're not getting that message promoted for free by the media like Apple is getting through press that has, for whatever reason, become favorable to Apple over time. And RIM is on the opposite side, that press has become negative to RIM. So they have to go full gear and promote that, because you can make money on BlackBerry, and the difference is nobody knows about the people that are.
But they've got to look at these opportunities where there's controversy with Apple, and they've got to be able to leverage this. And I think that Android has the opportunity here as well. I'm going to assume that Apple is going to do more and more of this as it comes by, and you're either going to adhere to what they want, which is if you see a business benefit for your organization, like Amazon, you don't pull the app off of the most populous tablet. You adhere to it, and then you think of your next strategy, which is for Amazon. Well, we're going to say screw you, because we're going to be deploying our own Android devices. We've got the Kindle, but we need the iPad right now for our business. So they're going to adhere to it. The only time this really has a challenge is that if the tablet market does materialize beyond the iPad, then I bet you, my assumption would be that Apple would revisit this approach when there's competition.
Nope, I don't think they will at all. I think Apple has never been a company that says we need to own the entire market. Apple says we need to own the high end of the market. We need to own the high-end customer who has money and is willing to spend money. And we will lop off, and I sound like a broken record. I'm sure I've said it 10 times on the podcast before, but we will lop off every loophole for other people to make money on our platform one by one, so that there's always a way for people to make money outside, but we will lop them off one by one until the point when we are the only people that can make money on our platform. But at that point, there will be 100 million people using our platform that won't want to use something else, whose costs don't change.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost me anymore if Apple is taking 30% or they're giving it back to a developer. I mean, me as an end user. So as an end user, my experience is no different. So when Apple can say, you know what, we're owning all the revenue, but all the customers, they want to be on iPhone, so you got to be there or get out. It's the Walmart syndrome. Yeah. Walmart doesn't care. Walmart says, you know what, we have so many million people coming into our stores. Suppliers, you want to be in our store? Here's the terms. You don't want to be in our store? That's fine. We don't have a problem with that. We'll have other suppliers lining up. Apple is going to get themselves in that same position where they're not the only game in town, but they are a high-end game in town that people don't want to move off of. And if you want to be on Apple, you'll have to be by their terms, and that's fine. They're not doing anything to make themselves monopoly in some untoward way. I'm not sure that Walmart has done that. I don't think Google has done that. Yeah. But people are choosing this over other alternatives. And when you have, people, just general consumers, making choices that end up locking themselves into a box later on, there's not that much you can do about it from a developer standpoint. You only have to hope that the volumes get so big that you can still make money off of it. I mean, it goes back to what I said before. Apple wants to give away the iPhone. They never will because they make money on it. But they want to be in the point where they could say, you know what, we could give this out for free, and we know we'll make tons of money on it. Yep. But we'll still charge for it because we want to make some money there too. Their
offering is so broad, and the licensing deals that they have so plentiful with iTunes and with movie rentals and TV show rentals, and this this ridiculous rumor that they're going to go out and buy Hulu. And when you start to think about what Apple offers, it's just one prong in this attack, maybe they won't renegotiate or reconsider this, but at some point there's going to be. I keep coming back to if the tablet market establishes itself, because right now there isn't a tablet industry, there's an iPad industry. And as soon as, if it does establish it, and Apple drops down to 15% or 20% of the tablet market, and there's choice, it would be good for the consumer. It'd be great for the content developers and those folks that are selling things. And I think that, but right now there is no choice. You want a distribution, you want that, you've got to be a part of Apple's ecosystem, and they hold the purse strings. And right now they're doing what every company in the world would do in their position, which is take. And I don't mean that in an abusive way. There's an opportunity here, and it's a short-lived window for Apple to be able to do this. And I don't defend this, but if I'm in their position, I'm thinking, hey, we've got a captive audience. Nobody is fighting us right now in this space. It's time. Let's do this. And in some point, they're going to go back, and Apple will be back to, maybe in 10 years, the sad sack it was 10 years ago. Who knows? But right now, you take what you can when you can, and that's the business mentality. It's rough, but man,
rough on developers.
Yep.
But it's not rough on consumers.
No.
And there's strategies to help combat this. I mean, really, you have to combat it with volume, right? You as a platform, if you're RIM, if you're Samsung, if you're Nokia, Google, Microsoft, whatever it is, the way you combat Apple is by getting volume out there and getting those people integrated into services that you provide that give people as easy ways to spend money as Apple does.
Yep.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Go out there, build what is working, and then innovate from that point forward. Give something to people that they're comfortable with. Don't make them change their habits. And then once you've got them, then start evolving from that point forward. But you need to catch up to what the market leader is doing first before you can evolve past them. Say RIM took their $3 billion that they've got in the bank right now, and spent $1 billion of that to build an iTunes equivalent. So take AppWorld and evolve it to hire 100 people and just get the feature set of AppWorld up to the point where it's equivalent to iTunes. It's a desktop client. Maybe it doesn't work quite as perfectly, but it looks similar. The functions are similar there. You get people comfortable using it. Then you take the second $1 billion and you subsidize all your phones by $150 a phone. And you get the carriers to subsidize by $100 a phone.
Yep.
Now you've taken $250 off the cost of a phone. So you've dropped it down to, say, $200. Get it down to $199. So you have a top-end BlackBerry selling for $199 with all these services in place. Yes, you have to deal with brand issues in terms of, well, now my phone's $1.99 or $199 instead of $699. But if you got another 5 million of those out into customers' hands and you had an infrastructure available so you could monetize those 5 million customers, that's worth a lot. You'll make your money back on it and you'll start to stem the tide. But until other companies, whether it's Microsoft or RIM or Google, take a strategy like that to get something in customers' hands where even though the perception is it's not as good as Apple, if someone can't afford the $600 phone from Apple, but they can afford the $200 phone from you, and it has the same services, even if it's not quite the exact same source, that's a pretty powerful alternative.
I agree. I mean, I don't understand. If there's going to be two co-CEOs of RIM, let's just take that job. All right? I heard they might be auditioning for that.
Will apply as a pair.
Yeah, well, exactly. We both of us at one time. Haven't you seen our body of work on 23 episodes of Two Guys on Mobile? Come on. Look, we've already fixed your company for you. Just drop a couple of bill. We say this tongue in cheek. I mean, we're not going to talk about this, but RIM did announce a massive, 10% workforce reduction today, 2,000 people. So if there's anybody out there that we know that's being impacted by this, we don't want to make light of that. It is something that is terrible and tragic, and something that was bound to happen. Especially when they, as you said, they cast such a wide net in hiring, that this is probably the right adjustment to make, but it still doesn't make it any less impactful. It doesn't hurt less. So we hope that everybody who's laid off actually rebounds and finds a good place. And we'll talk more about what RIM's plight is. But
and if you were laid off and you're actually good at your job, come talk to me. We could use some people at BitHeads. So
there are a lot of people hiring today, that's for sure. So go to bitheads.com. All right, before we get into our last story, I want to draw your attention to a good friend and a good company of ours, something called Pontifex App Leads. For those of you who have actually been around here long enough, you know that Pontifex App Leads is a great way for you developers to actually generate some revenue. It's an in-app, contextualized sign-up advertisement that doesn't take your users out of the app, and when you click on a banner, it doesn't take you through the browser and disrupt the action inside of the game or the application. It actually happens all inside of the application. It's a sign-up form. It's in context to what the application is about, and it also helps you build your mailing list, which is one of the most important things when you're launching applications, whether it's a game or an enterprise app or a productivity app or anything, is that you want to be able to be positioned for the next time, the next app that you release. Pontifex App Leads does that and much more. Plus, you can earn a lot more money than the average advertising company does, sometimes up to 100 times the eCPMs that you're seeing right now with some of the traditional ad platforms. So we implore you, we want you to make some money, we want you to be around. Please, please, please check out Pontifex App Leads at appleads.com. They're a good sponsor, a good friend, and we really hope that you'll support them as much as they supported us. So we love them. We thank them for being here. Thank you, Pontifex App Leads. We love you guys, and we want you to make some money. All right, our last story here. Let's talk this through here, because we've been talking a lot about Apple and RIM and Microsoft. We might as well just finish off with a hardware story. And this is not something that I like doing, but this tiny little company, I don't know if you've heard of them, a little company called like Samsung, I think is what they're called, about to take over the #1 spot. I think that this is a very unique thing. If they do 20.3 million devices in this past quarter, they'll jump ahead of Apple into the second place in hardware sales, and they'll be just a scant 6 million behind or so Nokia. And I think the analysts are predicting that within no time, Samsung will be the #1 hardware smartphone producer on the planet. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they kind of didn't come out of nowhere, because Samsung's been selling phones for a long time and they've been around a lot. But when you talk about the big platforms and the big players for the last year, everyone says Google, RIM, Apple, and sometimes Microsoft. And while Samsung is running Android on the majority of those phones that they're selling, they have their Bata platform, which is doing so-so, but effectively it's the Android platform they're selling most of those phones on. They kind of come out to the point where if they become the #1 phone manufacturer in terms of volume, and therefore the #1 Android manufacturer in terms of volume, what percent of Android devices are actually going to be made by Samsung? And you end up with a situation where when Microsoft and Nokia get their shift over, the primary company selling Windows Phone 7 is Nokia, and by that time, the primary company from a unit shipment standpoint selling Android is Samsung. Mm-hmm. But what weight does Samsung then gain in the Android world and with Google by being their #1 manufacturer, like Nokia is gaining with Windows Phone 7? And is this shift really showing the fact that it's very, very difficult to have a platform without a #1 vendor dominating your space? Because RIM's dominating theirs, Apple's dominating theirs, Nokia presumably will dominate the Windows Phone 7 space to whatever size of market that will be. If Samsung is here, you basically have OS and a hardware manufacturer kind of paired at the hip in each case. You don't end up having like 4 different manufacturers, each with 25% market share on it, which is an interesting, because that's what we thought Android was going to be. We thought Android was going to be 10 manufacturers, each distributed from 12% through 3 or 4% of the market, and adding up to the full market, and having to deal with 10 different manufacturers making Android handsets that were going to be 10 different form factors and splintering here and there, and therefore causing fragmentation. But if you end up with Samsung as such a dominant place, do developers end up going, well, maybe I just build for the Samsung Android handsets and therefore don't have to worry about fragmentation? And does that intrinsically put everybody else at a disadvantage by using Android?
Well, it's so true. When it comes to the number of devices, though, I think that pairing is so important, because both of them have the distribution capabilities that that they have the marketing budget that's going to go behind this thing, and it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a number of smaller handset manufacturers that are going to succeed in kind of breaking percentages in this market. But the staggering statistic that I just read, which was that the Galaxy S2 sold 3 million units in the first 55 days. That's what they're talking about is a phone every 1.5 seconds. Like right now, gone. And another one. Oh, that was 2. And that was another one. So that's pretty amazing. And the fact that one phone doubled Samsung's mobile operating profit, that's an impact. Obviously, these guys have been known to make great phones for quite some time, and they're about to end Nokia's 15-year reign on top. An interesting comment on TechCrunch. A comment was brought up that says, if the iPhone was available on all carriers, it wouldn't even be close. This is an interesting slant here, is that if the iPhone was available on more carriers, do you think that the iPhone would dominate still? Would sell more than, obviously more than 20.3 million devices, because the iPhone in the last quarter has had a resurgence. It kind of kicked Android's ass the last quarter, and everybody else's, and they didn't even release a new phone, right? So do you think that that an iPhone 5 combination on multiple more carriers would give Samsung a run for its money?
It would. You're not going to have a negative sales increase or a decrease by having it available on more carriers.
Yeah.
But as RIM has seen, as they're on carriers in basically every country in the world.
Yeah, 340 or 400 carriers or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. That you don't get a kind of linear increase in sales by being on different carriers, or even a linear increase in revenue, because there are some countries like Malaysia, for example, which BlackBerry sells like ridiculous. They sell tons of BlackBerry in Malaysia, but they don't sell them for $500 a pop. And those people are not spending an average of 10 or 12 US dollars a year on content on it, because that's not how the currency in the system works. The currency in that country is valued so much lower that $10 US is a massive amount of money for them to spend. And so while you can get more customers that way, Apple may have fairly deep penetration into the high value market.
Right.
People that are spending $500 on a phone.
Yeah, but they're not. They're spending $149 or $199 on the iPhone 4.
Not the iPhone 5, though.
I don't know what that's going to be like, but my guess is that, they'll reduce the 3GS to $49, the 4 to $99, and the 5 to $199. They know that they have to be price competitive, and they know that it's, as you said, they can give it away for free, but they still make a little bit of money off of that, and they want more people in the ecosystem, right? More devices means more.
I guess I've always been skeptical that Apple actually wants the lower-end customer, because it's a different customer base. What they want is different than what the higher-end customer wants. I don't mean higher in terms of social status or anything. I just mean in terms of the money that you're spending. When you're selling a $50 phone to somebody, that's a different person than you're selling a $500 phone to.
Yeah, I agree.
And being in that market means you have fragmentation to deal with. And Apple, so far, one of the pluses developers keep saying, which is not totally true, is that, there's no fragmentation to deal with because all the devices are compatible with each other. Which, fine, if you're running a simple business app, is true. It's not true across all platforms.
Right.
But as soon as you have this 3GS and an iPhone 4, there's already a difference there. When you add the iPhone 5 at even higher end, the delta between supporting iPhone 5 and 3GS is so high that you're going to end up with this class of customers that can use these cool iPhone 5 apps And the 3GS now, even though it's $99, is basically an iPod with a phone on it.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to run all these apps that require you to run iOS 5 and have a gyroscope on it, have NFC on, have all this cool stuff that people are talking about. So you end up segmenting your customer base, and you end up in the same situation that RAM or the Androids is or are going to be in which you have a broad customer base, but you can't monetize all those customers to the same extent.
Well, whatever this is going to shake down, the 15-year reign of Nokia, however long that will be in this industry, which is an incredible length of time. It's such a massive head start. It's one of those things. I don't think that we'll ever see a dynasty like that, at least not for the long haul. And I think if Samsung does take over, it's going to be fierce, and we're going to go back and forth between all of these manufacturers. And don't count, as you said, don't count Nokia out with Windows Phone 7. Because we haven't seen that. Don't count RIM out because we haven't seen any devices with the QNX operating system. Don't count Apple out because we haven't seen what they're going to do in iOS 5. We haven't even, or the iPhone 5, we haven't even talked that there's all these rumors floating around about the iPhone Nano coming out, which is a secondary line. And you can't knock out anybody in this space right now because it's big enough for everything. And I saw this great quote from John Criswick, our good friend John, about there was an article in a local newspaper talking about how application developers were abandoning RIM, and he said, basically, the market that they're fighting over are the folks that don't have smartphones, because that's a big market right now that don't have smartphones. That's where the growth is, and of course, there's going to be a balancing out or a leveling out. But market share, every quarter, each one of these guys sells more smartphones. Like, it's not like they're declining. They're not declining. They're just selling more. Some are selling them faster. And I think that we're going to see this over the next bunch of quarters, that battle. There's never going to be a 15-year reign again like this. I think, at least not for a long time when it comes to these to the hardware space. I think it's now evened out. And we've always said this. There's enough room for 5. There's enough room, and there's a big enough world out there for 5 major smartphone makers.
Yeah, I mean, the only one I would see that has, again, a chance to have a long reign is Nokia, not because of Nokia, but because they have Microsoft backing them. Yeah. And because I do foresee that if Microsoft merges or works to merge their desktop and mobile platforms to support similar technologies over the next 3 years, that being on that bus rolling along can certainly float your boat pretty good. So I could see that taking over, but still, I mean, it's not going to be a 90% thing. It's going to be, okay, so they may be the number one for 10 years in a row, but not like Nokia was number one before, where they were selling ridiculous
50% of every phone. Yeah.
Crazy. So.
It'll never be like that. And I think that we're seeing that level off, which is great. It's a very competitive world out there. It's a big world. And, there are, I think you'll start to get into niche phones, and the market share will increase. My big hope, is that there's some entrepreneur out there that we don't know of that in 10 years from now is going to, it's no longer evolution in the phone space. It's like, this is revolution in the phone space. They're creating that perfect device, and that can storm up and take some percentages as well, but we'll hold off on that.
I thought Apple had the perfect device. Isn't that what everybody said?
Well, I love it. I love it.
Sarcasm, just in case anybody is listening and didn't get that. But.
The only thing I don't like about these devices is the fact that I'm putting this great screen up to the side of my face, right? So we got to figure out how to get the implant right in. The Apple implant. Right there. Right inside of my ear.
I'll put an implant in there for you if you want.
Yeah. You and Tim Ferriss. I'm pretty sure he's testing it right now. So, we've abused and we've used everybody's time. We spent 53 or 54 minutes talking about Pandora and the hope that it's not just Radio 2.0, that there's actually a plan in there to expand this, taking radio and making advertising, doing the same thing that we're already doing on my typical radio is not what we want to see from there. Also, Apple and the controversy around the fact that they want to take 30% of all book sales, revenue from book sales as well, and Samsung about to be poised to knock down a 15-year reign. It's not like it was the Mongol Empire, right? 15 years is nothing compared to the way those guys dominated. But 15
mobile industry is like dog years, where the mobile industry years are like
pretty much. Years. But even then, I mean, the Mongols owned, they That was a reign. 15 years was a great one, and Samsung's poised to take it, but we don't think that that Nokia is ruled out at this point, simply because we haven't seen the fruits of all their efforts. That's it. 3 big stories, 1 hour of your time. Can't believe it. We cruise through that. Hopefully you feel the same way. And if you agree, disagree, if you have a comment, if you have a suggestion, reach out on tether@gmail.com. Reach out, even if you see this on bacononthego.com. Leave a comment somewhere. We will find it. Maybe even when I post this in LinkedIn, you found it there. Leave a comment there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to get engaged in the conversation. Reach out and let us know if there's anything you agree or disagree with. Right, Bacon?
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, you can find Jeff at The Suave Hog on Twitter or bacononthego.com. You can find me at untether.tv, probably where you found this. And at Rob Woodbridge on the Twitter. And we'll be around. My hope is next week. If there's any great stories that percolate, I'm pretty sure there will be. We'll be around next Monday when it comes time for episode numero 24. That's 24 for you Anglophones in the audience. Really appreciate the fact that you watch, that you've listened, wherever you may be. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Jeff, thank you for doing this as usual. And we'll see you all next week on Two Guys on Mobile. Later.